Mulan and Tenet have been getting kind of beat up in the press recently.
Why is Tenet getting beat up?
Not so much about the quality of the movie itself, but more because WB is sort of hiding the box office performance from the other studios and from the world at large, because they allegedly don't want to reveal the fact that the domestic box office in the US is like pretty small for a Christopher Nolan movie. Like it's
tiny. It's
like 20 million all told so far, which is like a tenth of the total worldwide, which is the total worldwide is like 200 million now. And it feels like WB is like, even though everyone would probably give them a pass for not having high box office numbers during the pandemic,
right?
They still don't want to kind of come right out and say that the United States market is performing so low.
Yeah.
And
okay, fair enough.
It's, it's forcing them to do things like, apparently it was the performance in the US of Tenet that's making them push Wonder Woman 1984 to December now.
Yeah, like as if that date's going to hold.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's part of it is like the actual reality of the pandemic itself and the number of cases, but part of it is like they used Tenet as a bit of a guinea pig, and they were like, all right, if we put the biggest, splashiest, most big screen friendly movie in theaters, regardless of safety concerns, basically, will people come out in droves to see it? And it turns out in the US, it's not, because people are taking their health seriously, for at least in that capacity.
Or they're just like preoccupied with other things going on, right? Like,
sure.
There's like the wildfires, the voting stuff, the mailbox stuff. I mean, it's...
Yeah, totally. It's just a horror show, basically, in so many ways. And I think maybe that has forced them to push Wonder Woman, because they're like, all right, if people weren't going to come out for the what was going to be one of their biggest movies of the year, come hell or high water, they're not going to come out for a Wonder Woman sequel. Right. So they're going to push it back to see if maybe, cross your fingers, the pandemic will have cooled down a bit by then and people will be more likely to go see it. I don't know.
Do you think that would mean like movies like Tenet would stay in theaters a lot longer?
Yeah, there were some people saying that Tenet will probably be like one of the longest running theatrical releases in recent memory, because they'll just keep it in there because there's A, nothing for it to compete against in terms of other big releases, and B, it's the smartest thing because how else are they going to make the money that they were banking on?
Yeah, that's true.
What do you think is a better story though? The weirdness over how Tenet is being released, or the response to Mulan?
For juicy details, I think Mulan is better, but
because with Mulan, it's from what I heard, it's the basically they were shooting in an area where these concentration camps, allegedly, that the Chinese government have set up for the Uyghur people, the Muslim people in that part of China. And Disney went so far as to thank all these propaganda divisions, which they probably had to, otherwise they would have stepped on some toes in the party and got
Well, this is the inherent problem when you have Western filmmakers making movies that are intended for both Western and Chinese audiences.
So they want to keep the central government happy, and they know that they can't shoot in that area if they don't kiss some rings. But then they're also sort of putting the blinders on when it comes to what that government is doing in that area.
Yeah, and you end up coming out with a product that no one really wants. So, I mean, it's kind of like Disney with Star Wars again, where they try to please everyone and try to get the widest ranging demographic they can, and it ends up, just pissing off a lot of people. Welcome to the 82nd episode of the Extra Buttery Podcast, a free-flowing conversation between two guys who love film and TV. My name is Jason Chen, and I'm joined by my co-host Robert Snow. In this episode, we'll talk season 2 of The Boys on Amazon, Netflix's new film from Charlie Kaufman, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Unpregnant, a teen dramedy on HBO Max, and Rob's thoughts on 3 films that he's seen so far at TIFF. So, Rob, I think you were late to the Boys game, but safe to say that you're a huge fan now, right?
Yes, I think people have been telling me for several months now, yourself included, that The Boys beats out Umbrella Academy when it comes to superhero satire. And you're totally right. I knew that season 2 was coming out, and I had kind of ignored it. I remember seeing an initial trailer for The Boys back when it premiered on Amazon, and I was kind of turned off by what felt like a bit of a exploitative or gimmicky kind of tone in that marketing, and it felt like it was kind of using gore just as like pure shock value. It wasn't really like motivated or anything.
To be fair, I think the gore is part of its shock value though, right? Like I think that ends up part of its being appeal.
Yeah, so it's part like, but it's not just like the Tarantino kind of gore that he was doing in some of his recent movies, where it's just there, just
not really a fetish.
Yeah, exactly. Now that I've watched through the whole first season, I'm caught up now with season 2 because they're doing these weekly releases with season 2. Now that it's back, I've flipped my allegiances pretty solidly now. Like I can still appreciate the Umbrella Academy, but if it's gun to my head, kind of choose between these two shows, I'm going to choose The Boys.
She's got a whole army of soups. We cost them too.
We need more soup!
Shit.
All right, what do we do? We can't just kill everyone.
That's exactly what we're gonna do.
This season kind of brings us right back to where we ended off, where The Boys is set in a world with superheroes who are sort of a combination between they actually have powers. They fly around. They have all kinds of different abilities. But not only do they allegedly save people and solve crimes and do all the superhero-y things, they're also pop culture stars in this world. And people know their identities. And they star in Marvel-style cinematic universes featuring themselves, doing real power stuff and real crime stuff. We see how this combination of pop culture and real life superpowers has sort of twisted many of them. And a lot of them are secretly or not so secretly pretty terrible people who are motivated only by greed or by wanting to have more power. And at the end of season 1, we had reached a point where this small upstart group of regular people who have grown to hate the so-called soups, led by Billy Butcher, who's played by Carl Urban, and Hugh Campbell, played by Jack Quaid. And they just are a little ragtag group of people who can't really hurt the soups, like, personally, unless they get them in a they know their weakness and they get really lucky. But they try to undermine the soups and use their reputations or their desire to keep their reputations clean against them. And we catch up now with the boys, this group of people, after they've scored a few initial blows against the soups, but they're still pretty much like number one fugitives.
So we're at the point where the two forces are kind of, the boys and the soups are kind of aware of each other's existence.
Yeah.
And so there's a sort of cat and mouse game going on. The leader of the soups, the biggest like team, I guess, is called the Seven, and they're led by this sort of Superman proxy called Homelander. And at the end of season 1, Homelander kind of turns on his own organization, and he basically wants to run the superhero company as he sees fit. So season 2 begins with fractions within the Seven and within the boys, because at the end of season 1, Billy Butcher and the boys kind of depart on less than amicable terms, but they're quickly reintroduced to each other because they need each other. They realize they need each other. And so far, the first 3 episodes of season 2 was kind of a setup. There's a new member of the soups. Her name is Stormfront, played by Aya Cash. And she doesn't really listen to Homelander willingly. She has ideas of her own. She comes in as a very independent woman. She's very powerful. Undermines the Seven a little bit, but very much has her own agenda, which we still, I don't think, know about. You're a bit ahead of me because I haven't seen episode 4, but what are your thoughts so far? Because I don't think they've gotten to the meat of the conflict yet, and we're almost halfway.
It introduces a new kind of potential background for Stormfront, which I won't spoil, but it's kind of creeping along. It feels like they're not going to do any big info dumps until like maybe episode 6, episode 7, something like that. But yeah, it essentially, Homelander has wrested a little bit more control over Vought, this, conglomeration that has, that not only markets the superheroes in their various pop culture outings, but also is a major pharmaceutical company and is revealed in season 1 to have manufactured this drug called Compound V, which is actually responsible for superheroes being a thing in this universe at all. And Homelander has kind of used the revelations about Compound V to take a little bit more control in the company. And the thing about Homelander is that he's a complete psychopath, but he's still a bit of a man-child.
Mm-hmm. Literally, he drinks milk.
Yeah, you see him in the first episode of this new season. He finds some frozen breast milk from his love interest from season 1, Elizabeth Shue's character. She departs the show in a rather explosive way at the end of season 1. But
you literally cannot see her anymore.
But he finds this frozen breast milk of hers that she'd kept in her office, which is being cleaned out, and he takes a few sips of it in this rather kind of skin crawling scene.
Right.
So Homelander, unlike a lot of the other superheroes, he was kind of a lab experiment. He never had a real upbringing, and the show kind of hints that it's this sort of arrested development that makes him even more psychotic than some of the other superheroes.
Anthony Starr, who plays him, by the way, is brilliant, eh?
Yes. I hadn't seen any, like he's an Australian actor. I think he'd been working mostly in Australian TV before this.
Right.
I hadn't seen him in anything before his work on The Boys. And he just when he comes onto the screen, you get that feeling of like anxiety that the other characters do because
definitely.
You know how powerful he is. And he's also selling how in love with himself he is and yet how insecure he is and how like unstable that makes him.
Yeah, I think what's the biggest draw for The Boys isn't necessarily like the superpower stuff, like the good versus evil, like the sort of like CGI fights that they have going on. It's sort of the layers beneath it. So basically Homelander trying to wrest control of this company. They talk about like legal maneuvers. They talk about stock prices. They talk about branding and marketing and sort of superficial images. And I think that's like a really, really poignant topic about how society works in general. I think it's a thinly veiled political commentary about where we are today as well.
Yes. And you see Stormfront, like she takes a very like guerrilla approach to that. Whereas like Homelander can kind of coast on the fact that he is like America's favorite son, and he wears the stars and stripes on his uniform and people respect him out of a sense of patriotism.
Yeah, he's very manicured.
Yeah, but Stormfront is very scrappy and kind of has this, she's always carrying her phone around and she's live streaming to all of her fans and telling them what she really thinks about the corporate overlords and how she doesn't buy into any of their marketing crap or any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so she gets this kind of groundswell of support that feels a lot more organic, even though we know she's being very manipulative about how she's doing
it. The one sort of topic I kind of want to touch on too is the Deep.
Oh yeah.
So the Deep was formerly one of the Seven, and he's an Aquaman proxy, and he's supposed to be like the comic relief. He's a despicable character. He has probably the worst superpower in that he can talk to fish, and that's basically it. He can swim very well, of course, but
breathe underwater, that kind of thing.
Right. But he has like these gills on his ribs that he finds very ugly.
Yeah.
And so because there's a bit of self-loathing, he projects it out by demeaning and degrading women very publicly.
Yes.
And in season 2, he kind of finds refuge in this sort of religious cult that kind of tries to remake him into a new person. My only issue is, what is his end goal? Like, his story so far is very disconnected from The Boys and the Seven.
Yes.
So at what point does he come back in? And he kind of does, but all he does is get a sperm whale get killed. But I'm wondering like what role he plays because I don't feel like he brings a lot of comic relief. In fact, I think he brings a bit of annoyance and I think a little bit of boredom to the show because I'm not very interested in his psychological mental problems. I don't find it very interesting.
It's hard to tell right now. They're definitely laying a lot of groundwork, and they continue to do that in the 4th episode that just premiered, the couple of days before we're recording this. So I feel like they'll wait until like they basically want to have what will likely amount to a pretty big punchline in probably the 7th or 8th episode, like the final run of season 2, and whatever it is will probably be a combination of like something that people didn't expect, some sort of subversion, but also like played for laughs. But he'll probably be, I feel like he'll be re-injected into the main story in a relatively big way, but it'll still be a jokey kind of thing.
He's got to be heroic, right? That's how his character kind of arc turns around, is that he's despicable at the beginning, but in the end, I feel like they're setting him on the road to redemption, but not exactly sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, it's a little bit unclear just yet, but yeah, they're clearly laying a lot of groundwork. And in fact, they weave this story into the fourth episode that you have no idea that it's related to the Deep until the very last scene of episode 4. So that kind of feels like it's representing their overall approach to the character, where they're just we're going to check in with the Deep occasionally and get a few laughs, but then there'll be some kind of button on it by the end of it. I feel like the same way with Huey, who I know you really don't like Huey, but
yeah, I really don't. I really don't.
I see what you mean. Like, he can be very annoying, and Jack Quaid is really playing up this PTSD kind of thing with his character. Again, it feels like there's laying a lot of groundwork for some big revelation. They've got to have Huey transform in some way, whether that's
here's my
you've got a theory about this.
Yeah, here's my big prediction is that by the end of season 2, or at least the beginning of season 3, Huey ends up taking Compound V and ends up having superhero powers. And I think that's when, I don't want to, shit on it, but I feel like when a good guy gets a superpower and a bad guy gets a superpower, the inevitable ending is for them to have this big fight.
Yeah.
I think it's more interesting how the boys are not superheroes and they have to think of ways to defeat the superheroes, subvert the superheroes. I feel like that's a more interesting conflict, and it definitely plays more into the underdog sort of type of feel that the boys have.
Yeah, if they that route would be. There's kind of no going back from that route, I think, because they've established that in this universe, babies are treated with this drug when they're infants, and that's really the only way that the only guaranteed way that they can develop superpowers, because they've found that if they dose people with this drug when they're adults, it causes incredible pain and they barely survive the process. And so if Huey were to do that, it would be one of these kind of werewolf kind of transformation scenes where he's just racked with pain, he's freaking out, but then he comes out the other side of it and he's got some sort of powers. But then what does the show become? Does the show hang on to that satire element or that criticism element anymore, as soon as they kind of they say well, anybody can be superheroes, and it gets to that thing from The Incredibles that Syndrome says, as soon as everybody has superpowers, nobody has them.
Speaking of painful experiences, I'm normally a fan of Charlie Kaufman. I'm thinking of ending things. This is his new movie that was just released on Netflix, starring Jesse Plemons and Jesse Buckley.
Yes.
I feel like we're going to have some disagreement here. I don't know. We haven't talked about this at all, but I found it a very tough watch. I find that this sort of thriller drama, I guess you could call it, just when it starts to get really interesting and creepy, he kind of pulls the rug out from under you and then he goes on another tangent. And so by the end of it, because there's so many things going on, I feel like it's one of those movies where they give you a riddle, but then they never intend to solve it anyway.
Yeah.
And even if you want to solve it, it's very difficult to. It's based on a book, and I'm sure book readers will have a better idea of what it is. But as a standalone movie, I can't say it was a very good experience. It runs 2 hours and 14 minutes-ish, so it's a bit long. I find myself zoning out for fairly good portions of it.
I can't say that I wholeheartedly enjoyed it either, to be honest.
Okay.
It's been the talk of film Twitter and Letterboxd. People have been kind of gushing about it in one way or the other. Some,
Yeah, I don't get that.
Maybe not it doesn't feel like it's gushing in the sense that not quite to the tone of something like Parasite when that came out.
Right.
People aren't saying that it's a be all end all movie that will, set all kinds of records and win a bunch of awards. But there's been a lot of chatter about it. And the thing about Charlie Kaufman is that, people will remember that he wrote Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Excellent movie.
Which is, fantastic. Yeah, that is a true 5-star for me.
Adaptation.
And then he also wrote Being John Malkovich, another one that I really, really like.
Yep.
With his directing, he hasn't directed quite as much. I've seen he made a stop motion animated movie for adults, with these kind of like felt like puppets called Anomalisa that
Yes.
picked up a Best Animated Feature Oscar nomination a couple of years ago when it came out. And I think he's done some short films. He's directed Synecdoche, New York with Philip Seymour Hoffman. That was before Anomalisa, now that I'm thinking back. But apparently, I haven't seen that one, but apparently it's a similar kind of tone to this one where there's a lot of like surrealism, a lot of like random aging, a lot of cross-cutting kind of thing. And that's, again, what we sort of have with I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
I'm visiting Jake's parents for the first time. He hasn't been my boyfriend for very long.
They really are looking forward to meeting you.
I think of ending things.
Hello? We're here.
Oh, hi.
Oh, it's all wet.
The structure, the setup of it is that Jessie Buckley plays a woman named Lucy who is going out to meet her boyfriend's parents in this rural part of Oklahoma. And it's like it's a winter's night. Snow is coming down like crazy. She's only been dating her boyfriend, played by Jesse Plemons, for 6 weeks. But at the longer the trip goes on, the deeper into this weird rabbit hole of like time loops and mysterious behaviors and cyclical conversations. You know, the hole goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and you feel like you're in quicksand. And I mean, I can respect a lot of parts of it.
Yes.
And
it's very well acted.
yeah, Jessie Buckley, who I'd seen recently in a movie, I think that it originally came out in 2018, Wild Rose, where she plays Jessie Buckley is Irish, but she plays a Scottish woman who was recently let out from prison, and she is obsessed with country music, which is a strange thing in Glasgow, Scotland. And so she has to kind of like put her life back together after getting out from prison while nurturing this love of country music and trying to convince her friends and family, who think she's a like total space case, that country music is a viable career thing for her. And so like that was her breakout role, and I loved her in that. I think she's equally great here. The question is like whether the material that Kaufman is working with is your cup of tea. And I think like, you know, maybe if you really like these kind of puzzle box stories where everything that everybody says has like 4 meanings, then maybe it's
or no meaning at all.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I like. It's unclear whether Jessie Buckley's character, how aware she is of how strange the circumstances around her are.
Also, is she real?
Yeah, again, like another kind of answer without or another question without an answer kind of thing, where she loses track of her own name a few times. Like she answers to different names.
Yeah, which is a recurring theme in the show because Toni Collette and David Thewlis are also in the movie, and they play Jesse Plemons' parents, and they're not given names either.
Yeah.
So there's just the mom and the dad. And they also play this like weird word game,
right,
where they're not always talking about what they should be talking about. Like at one point they talk about quantum psychics instead of quantum physics. And there's sort of like an internal dialogue that each of them have that you're kind of privy to, but not exactly sure if things are all happening in Jesse Plemons' head or Jessie Buckley's head, because they seem to be able to hear each other.
Yeah.
The part that I liked the best was then when they first initially meet the parents and they sit down and have the dinner. And Toni Collette is just like, to her credit, I think she's amazing, but she's unnerving on screen.
Yes.
She plays this really frantic woman who stutters, says the wrong word, suffers from tinnitus.
Yeah.
And David Thewlis plays this awkward dad that makes awkward jokes, and there's time jumps where they're young and then old with Alzheimer's and dementia. And then there's sort of like a dog that keeps shaking that is either dead or alive. There's barn animals that are neither dead nor alive as well. There's a story about a pig that's been eaten alive by maggots.
Yeah.
And you're trying to tie all this together and you can't. So there's certain, like you're right, there's certain snippets that are really good, but I couldn't tie it together. And then throughout this whole sort of night at the barn house, at Jesse Plemons' house, it's interspersed with this janitor that's cleaning this local high school. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of hinting toward the idea that the janitor is Jesse Plemons' character, right?
Yeah, that was the vibe I got. I mean, they never come right out and say it, which is the kind of the trend with this movie.
Right, exactly. And so Jessie Buckley, first she's like a painter, and then she's a physicist, then she's
a gerontologist.
A gerontologist. So it's kind of all over the place. I struggle to understand what the whole meaning of the movie is. So maybe you can help me, because there's a bit of Oklahoma, the play, the musical.
Yes.
Plays a bit of a part of this. And I don't know Oklahoma maybe as well as you do, but
I don't know it either. I'm no musical theater person. I mean, I was clicking around on Letterboxd after I finished watching it, and I was just sort of trying to see how other people had reacted to it. And one take I saw was this person loves Charlie Kaufman, and he gave it a full 5 out of 5.
Oh my God!
And I'm not with him on that score at all, but I'm more of like a 4 out of 5, maybe even a 3.5 if I'm in a bad mood.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think I'm at 3.5.
The vibe that he got from it was that it's a movie about identity, and identity in the context of relationships you have with other people, and how they're using this structure. Kaufman's using this structure of like a classic Meet the Parents setup, and using it to sort of like, it's almost like a prism or something, where you kind of you twist it and you see different colors come out. So we're getting kind of like multiple simultaneous Meet the Parents setups with like, all sorts of different couples all at once. And maybe one of the people in those couples is a quantum physicist, and one person is a painter, and one person is a gerontologist. And it's like we're having all like multiple similar conversations all at the same time. It's kind of like an initiation or a rite of passage, and all sorts of people have to go through that when they introduce their significant other to their parents for the first time. But the conversations that people have are all the same but different or something. That's kind of the vibe I got, which is an interesting idea. I mean,
okay,
does it need to be 2 hours and 15 minutes long? I don't know. I mean,
yeah, like I said, there are parts where I was kind of drifting off into my thoughts. The last thing I want to point out is there's a lot of references to other movies and other productions. Yeah. The final scene, and spoiler alert, where Jesse Plemons goes up on a stage to basically, I think he's winning the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
That scene and that thank you speech he gives, I don't know if you caught this, but it is very much a callback to A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah, and you see A Beautiful Mind DVD on the shelf of one of the of his childhood bedroom in the house.
Yeah, so the makeup, if you guys remember when they aged Russell Crowe and Jennifer Connelly in A Beautiful Mind, people kind of made fun of it because it looked a little much. With the lines they had on their face. So that was exaggerated in this. The speech he gives about finding, about logic and love, that's directly pulled from A Beautiful Mind. It kind of tells you that this is all kind of going on in someone's head. But the last part with like the naked janitor walking through the school and the cartoon pig that's being eaten by maggots, symbolism in film is always kind of subjective.
Yes.
Very much interpretive. I, for the life of me, could not figure it out.
I would have to read like 3 different accounts or 3 different reviews by like famous reviewers or something before I could decode that. That's still pretty dense.
Or even the book, right?
Yeah, I really don't know what that part was.
Yeah, I think the tragic flaw was that they didn't use Toni Collette as much as they should have, because she was by far the most freaky part of the movie. She is like a must-have in psychological thrillers. She's just so good at being manic. I mean, she's brilliant.
Also, I kind of loved the bit that Kaufman put in. 2 bits that are kind of like in there for film nerds. One is the kind of movie that we see the janitor watching at one point, where it looks like some sort of romantic comedy situation, but then he cuts to a title card with like directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Yes.
Which is there's apparently like an in-joke there where they were putting that sequence together in the editing room, and the editor just put the Zemeckis card in there as like a placeholder, but it made Kaufman laugh so much that he felt like he had to keep it in. So that's like a little film nerd thing. And then another film nerd thing was when they're driving back home from the dinner at the farmhouse, and for no reason at all, Jessie Buckley's character launches into a verbatim recitation of Pauline Kael's New Yorker review of John Cassavetes' movie A Woman Under the Influence, which is like a famous art house, American art house film.
They have a huge argument.
Yeah,
about this too.
and she's got this kind of like transatlantic accent that she's doing. I guess I'm not sure. I don't know how Pauline Kael spoke, but it's like an impression of Pauline Kael or something, who's a famous movie reviewer, and just like the kind of like arch, very high-minded language that Pauline Kael put into her reviews is just there, and it's just spilling out of Jessie Buckley, and then Charlie Kaufman being like, see how pretentious film reviewers are. Like, we're here trying to make art, and this is what they write about the stuff that we make. So it feels like he's getting a little dig in there.
Right.
If you're in the mood for something totally surreal and you just want to like absolutely no reality whatsoever, go see this one or queue it up on Netflix. But otherwise, exactly. Like it's still pretty dense, and it's not your kind of like relax on the couch kind of movie.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Speaking of two people sharing the road, HBO Max recently released a movie called I'm Pregnant. This is a sort of female buddy road trip movie starring Haley Lou Richardson and Barbie Ferreira. Haley Lou Richardson plays Veronica, who is this sort of type A headed towards Ivy League student that we see in all sorts of films, whose life has been very managed, I'd say, and who takes great pains in keeping up appearances. She's 17. She's a senior. She's going to Ivy League school. Bam, she gets pregnant. But in her home state of Missouri, she cannot get an abortion because she is under the age of majority without her parents' permission. So in a last-ditch attempt to basically save her future, she calls up Bailey Butler, played by Barbie Ferreira, a childhood friend but are no longer friends. And so Veronica kind of coerces Bailey to drive her to New Mexico to get an abortion.
I know we're not close anymore. True. And I'm the last person that you want to help.
Accurate.
But I need your help, and I don't have anywhere else to go.
Go where?
To get the thing, the procedure.
So you're hiding this from your man, your best friend.
Hey, girl.
And your Jesus freak parents. And you thought, why not ask Bailey Butler to drive me hundreds of miles? Because she probably doesn't have anything to do anyway.
Kind of, yes. Bailey, come on.
I'm just messing with you. You're right, I do not have anything going on.
And so what you have is Haley Lou Richardson, this type A girl, versus Bailey Butler, whose hair is dyed, who wears like a Sesame Street backpack, sort of like punk nerd sort of thing,
right?
But clearly they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. And so what happens is they take this hilarious, humorous road trip where there's a bit of coming of age, there's a bit of comedy in the fact that they meet really weird people. There's a bit of suspense too because the cops are after her. They meet this couple that are anti-abortion. So they kind of get kidnapped in that little story. But in the end, it's a very, very solid film. Haley Lou Richardson, Barbie Ferreira have excellent chemistry. They're both very funny. Haley Lou Richardson I'm a big fan of. I've seen a lot of her movies. She was in Columbus, which we both pretty much enjoyed. Yes. She is in her mid-20s, but because of the way she looks and the way she actually plays, she pulls off high school kids very well. She's one of those actresses.
Yeah, she's a little bit stuck in that mode right now. And
yeah, exactly. And so I think this is a very straightforward film. Where it kind of falls apart though is the plot, where it's a bit unfocused. Do you think a film about teens getting abortions, they would make some sort of like argument about abortions and feminists and the right for women to do what they want with their bodies, and to a certain extent they do, but they never go right in because they shoehorn in a lesbian love story for Bailey. They shoehorn in a weird sequence where they meet this like anti-abortion group and they go on this weird car chase through the desert.
Okay.
Which I guess makes up the action portion of the film. But what really makes it float, as I said before, is the two leads. They sit in the car and talk about life, and it's really hard to make interesting, but they somehow make it work.
Well, I mean, in my head, I can really picture the way this movie unfolds. Like it seems to follow like a pretty classic road movie structure.
Yes, exactly.
And yeah, those road movies really live or die on the strength of their leads, because if you got two people cooped up in a car, you're either going to cut out the driving sequences entirely and just show them getting up to hijinks when they stop, or you've got to write the movie in a way that's where like it can sustain long sections of them just arguing or carrying on in the car. And yeah, so I can see how like the fact that they have great chemistry is like probably the most important component here.
Yeah, and there's obviously a backstory to their friendship that we never really get into, and it's kind of culminates in this like a shouting match that they have. And I wish we had a little bit of more of that. I wish we had a bit more of why they grew apart and why they came back together, rather than rehashing old events that we never see.
Right.
And it's one of those ways where those tricks, I guess, where you can add layers to a character without showing that. But I wish that part took more center stage than this lesbian love story that they had written for Bailey. But I think it's an hour and 40 minutes, something like that.
Okay,
So fairly decent watch. You were going to talk about 3 other films that you saw at TIFF too, one of which was No Man's Land, which we both were very much interested in.
So TIFF 2020 is running right now in a very kind of reduced state. And they've got, usually there's about 300 movies at TIFF, and they've cut that back to about 50. Almost all of them are available digitally, and there's a few in-person screenings. I've only got one of my 7 movies this year as an in-person screening, but one of the digital ones was Nomadland, a new film from Chloe Zhao. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I've seen, again, people on film Twitter kind of a buzz about Chloe Zhao. I've not watched any of her movies before now. This is my first of hers that I've seen. But Nomadland follows a woman played by Frances McDormand, a woman named Fern, who, when the action of the movie begins, we see this title card describing the closure of a gypsum plant or a sheetrock plant in this completely middle of nowhere place called Empire, Nevada. And this sheetrock factory was the linchpin of this community. And the second it shuts down in 2011, the entire community just flitters away into dust. And this sets Frances McDormand's character, kind of casts her to the 4 winds, and she has no home anymore. The entire town is shut down, and she has become a modern day nomad, thus the title. And the movie just follows her as she makes her way around the United States, living in campgrounds and trailer parks. She's got this white panel van. This kind of looks like it used to be like a telecom van or something. It's got an orange kind of safety light on top that she's repurposed into a camper. And she's built out the inside. She's added, a bed and countertops and things where she can like make food and hang up clothes and things like that. And she kind of travels around. She encounters all these interesting characters in these parks, and kind of comes to terms with where she is in life and what the right way to live is. Is everyone kind of expected to have a house and a picket fence and a family and kind of go about their day in an office and go back, to suburbia? Or is the way that Fern is living, is that just as valid? It's not a long movie. It's about an hour and 50 minutes. And it uses a lot of people were kind of clowning on it because almost all the movie is shot during magic hour, the kind of golden light time just before the sun sets, when you get these kind of like epic shots if you're shooting. And so it feels like they're like, oh, forget about whatever happens to these characters when it's not magic hour. The only important stuff happens when the sun is beautiful. And there's the characters that she crosses paths with. I've got to do more reading about it, because in the credits of the movie, they're all credited with basically their own name. Like they play the character name is just their first name, but then the person who played them that's first name, last name. Like, so it feels like a lot of these people are just like real nomads who were cast as themselves in the movie, and Frances McDormand gets to know them. The only like major other actor who's a part of the cast who's playing a fictional character is David Strathairn, who becomes a sort of like a close friend, maybe potentially a love interest for Frances McDormand's character. But they don't really this isn't like a romantic comedy or anything. Like it's not about their relationship. It's more about like Frances McDormand kind of living this life on the road. But yeah, I feel like this is one of these like buzzy festival things that's going to be on everyone's tongues when the Oscars rolls around. I mean, Frances McDormand won Best Actress already, but she could be up for number 2 for this thing.
This was, I should mention that Chloe Zhao had sort of made a name for herself from her previous film, and she was picked to direct The Eternals, which is the Marvel Universe movie.
Okay.
So I believe she was picked for that movie before No Man Land came out.
Right.
That would make sense because Eternals comes out next year. But she's one of those like up and coming directors that I think everyone should be really paying attention to. Not just because she's female or because she's Asian, just because like she's so far consistently cranked out really, really great stuff.
Yeah. And that's a bit of a trend too with Marvel, where they kind of keep their eyes out for up and coming indie talent. And then they're like, have all of the money in the world, make us a huge blockbuster sensation that also gets us good reviews because you have a background as an indie filmmaker.
Right. Exactly. And the part that you said about like it being sort of like a documentary makes sense because it's based on a book called No Man Land, a work of nonfiction by Jessica Bruder. So actually, you know what? Like the running theme in all of this is that all the things we've seen so far have been based on some sort of book or written written material. So The Boys was a comic. I'm thinking of Ending Things was a novel by a Canadian writer, actually. I'm Pregnant was a story, was adapted from a story as well, and No Man Land now. So really interesting how, we talk about Hollywood has like a real lack of original material. But then we get these book adaptations that I think can be really quite refreshing.
I was certainly like big budget blockbuster stuff can feel like it's running out of gas on the regular. But there's
a little bit.
There's lots of material out there.
The bets are so big. There's so much financial cost associated with it. But we also get a lot of flavor from other countries too, because you saw another movie from Gaza.
From Gaza, which this is called Gaza Mon Amour. And this is from a pair of brothers who are co-directors on this, the Nasser brothers. It's Tarzan and Arab Nasser. And I don't think I've ever seen a movie from Gaza before. I mean, the most I know about Gaza as a country is it's a very disputed area, in the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's a small stretch of land. Nobody can really agree whether it should be an independent country or part of Palestine or part of Israel. Everyone's got opinions about it. So this movie kind of zeroes in on this small kind of circle of people who are living in this kind of war-torn context, and you'd expect it to be kind of like a dreary movie or a little bit depressing, but it's actually a romantic comedy centered on people who are like 55 plus, which very unexpected. But the movie is about a man named Issa. He's a fisherman, and he lives in this basically like a bombed out kind of hovel where the power's being cut regularly at night. He doesn't even have a shower to wash himself in. You just see him like, getting bowls of water and pouring it over his head in a little bathroom area. So he's really like living, by the skin of his teeth. And he's never married, but he has a sister who comes by and helps him with like household chores. And he's out one night, picking up the meager catch of fish that he's allowed to get in this small harbor area. And he pulls up this statue of Apollo, this bronze statue of Apollo, right out of the water, as if it would just, magically put into his net. The thing about the statue, though, is that it's got a very erect penis. And this is a problem for Issa because Gaza is a very traditional place, and people around there, they're not too comfortable with like very open kind of displays of sexuality. So he's at a total loss for what to do with this, and he kind of like laboriously pushes this heavy statue into a closet of his little shack, and he has sort of like an inkling that maybe there will be some kind of like cash windfall from having found this thing. At the same time, he's also he's got his eye on a lady who, of his same age, like 55 plus. She's a seamstress in the local market, and she has an adult daughter who lives with her. And he's a very like shy kind of guy. He doesn't really know how to approach her and ask her to go on a date with him. And of course, you've got the whole like traditional culture again that's sort of setting up barriers between the two of them. And just when he thinks that, he has formed a bit of a connection to this woman and also might be getting a bit of cash from the discovery of this statue, everything kind of goes sideways and the government gets involved and he gets accused of having stolen the thing, or that maybe he made it as some sort of like lewd display of like sexuality. And it's like his life just gets getting completely derailed no matter what he does. Again, like a nice, quick runtime.
I always love those movies that keep it nice and tight,
Yeah. I think it knows like these Nasser brother guys. They know the kind of limitations of the material they have. They know that it's this isn't some big epic sweeping war film. This is just like a tiny little kind of human story, romantic comedy. But the difference being that they've got this this context, this setting that a lot of people who will be seeing this movie are going to be totally unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it puts a part of the world that we don't know very well on display. And I always go back to this like it's a time worn phrase by now. It's a famous quote by Roger Ebert. Movies are machines that generate empathy. And you watch movies like this and you feel that kind of like you're building a connection to this part of the world that you probably would never think to visit. And people whose lives are very different from your own. So it was a bit heartwarming to kind of experience that.
Do you have a score?
I think I would go like 4 out of 5 on it. It doesn't do anything crazy innovative in terms of like romantic comedy structure or anything like that, but it's got the benefit of this seemingly fresh to us setting and context, and the kind of the jokes that come from the characters' reactions to this this very, very proud statue.
Right. And then there's a third film that you watch that has also like a very interesting premise, Shiva Baby.
Yeah, another kind of a bit of like a religious kind of tone to this one too. Yeah, this is the first feature by Emma Seligman. She's a Canadian filmmaker who is based out of New York now. And this is the story of a young woman in her early 20s who is kind of stumbling her way through college. And she's decided, as a bit of a lark and a way to earn a bit of extra cash, to sign up with a sugar daddy app and start dating men who are much older than her. And when the movie begins, we see her in one of these meetups with a guy, and she tells these guys that she's saving money for law school, and she's one of these people who kind of she's always concocting a new story to tell people to kind of like throw them off the scent of the fact that she doesn't have her life figured out. As soon as their hookup is over, she gets a call from her mother asking her to come to a Shiva, or a Jewish funeral. Mm-hmm. And all of her friends and family from her neighborhood, from the Jewish community, have kind of gathered at this house in the suburbs. And when she gets there, she's kind of like rolling her eyes about it. She doesn't really want to be there, but she soon discovers that one of the other guests at this Shiva is the guy that she was just with.
Oops.
And he's like, it turns out that he has all these connections to her friends and family, and now she's got to run around this Shiva without like freaking out and causing a scene, and try to stay one step ahead of all of the lies and fibs and things that she's told to her friends and family members, so that her background with this guy does not get revealed, and that his wife doesn't find out. His wife is also with him at the Shiva. It's based on a short that Emma Seligman had made, which I haven't seen yet. Same name, same basic concept, but she's basically, by making this into a feature, she's kind of expanded the concept, added in a bunch of extra characters. And it's a lot like with Gaza Mon Amour. It's very charming. It throws us like headfirst into a community that maybe a lot of us aren't super familiar with. Mm-hmm. And even though this is set in like, upper class New York kind of environment, the eccentricities or the specific kind of nature of this very tight-knit Jewish community might feel a little bit foreign to people. So the movie kind of helps us navigate that and just kind of points out how, everyone's family can be a little bit stifling. Everyone's family can be a little bit like too up in your business. And it's got a lot of like very relatable bits of, elderly family or friends coming up and being like, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? What are you doing with your life? This kind of stuff.
We've all had those questions.
Yeah.
Right?
But with the added peril of like, you've got to get your story straight because the people that you're trying to avoid at the same gathering are also in the area, in the room, who might, call you out on these fictions that you're spinning.
I think like all these questions that get asked, are you married? What are you doing with your life? How's your job? Blah, blah, blah. I think like every culture and every sort of family has these questions. What makes them different is the environment you're in and the cultural background that you have.
Right.
So like this kind of reminds me of that Awkwafina movie, The Farewell.
Yes.
Where he gets bombarded by very similar questions. And obviously there's not the, sugar daddy aspect to it. But it's one of those things where like, if you have a small budget and you're looking at like a sort of an indie project film, there's like a million ways you can kind of go with these really simple premises. And I really enjoy it when it presents something that me or you or anyone else haven't been really exposed to. For this one, this would be, I guess, the this upper class, Jewish society, right?
Yeah, Jewish family, yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that's really interesting. It's one of those things where I feel like it's very accessible and you don't need to think a lot to react to it.
Yes, and I will say that like the fact that like the funeral is something like they can be pretty mundane. They happen to everybody. But the fact that Emma Seligman and her star, Rachel Sennott, are able to wring so much tension out of a very basic setup. I mean, this is a movie like I don't know how much of The Office you watched and like some of the cringe comedy in The Office.
I've seen The Office multiple times, every episode.
And obviously like, they balance out the cringe comedy in there with like other types of comedy too, like the rivalry between Jim and Dwight and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for me, like cringe comedy is one of those things where like I've got a big grin on my face, but I'm like hitting a pillow next to me to try to relieve the tension because it's like the social scenarios and the people like these incredibly awkward conversations which are like just dialed up to 11, like just complete you're just writhing in pain because it's so awkward and embarrassing. You feel for these characters. Mm-hmm. And I was actually, I mentioned this on Letterboxd in my quick little review. I was glad that this was one of my digital screenings because there were literally times where I had to pause this thing and recover from the awkwardness. That's
Scream into a pillow.
Yeah, that's how intense the cringe was in this. And it's a good thing that it's like that, but you just have to go into this movie being prepared for that because it will hurt you how intense this is and how you feel for this character,
That's a hard balance to achieve as well, like if it gets too cringe, it can really turn people off. There are certain episodes of The Office where it really makes you physically uncomfortable.
Yes, that was what this was for like a full hour. Like it's shorter.
Oh no.
It's shorter than anything I've seen so far. So it's only an hour, 17 minutes. But if it was any longer, I think I don't know what I would have done because again, incredibly well written, incredibly well performed. But that social tension, that social anxiety stuff is so pointed in this.
Do you want to quickly talk about Cobra Kai?
Yeah. I mean, I'm the worst person to talk to Cobra Kai about because I have not seen the original Karate Kid. I know I've lost like instantly like so many movie buff points. But it's just one of those.
I think people who are the 5 people who are listening to this podcast just turned you off.
Yes. It's just one of those cultural blind spots. I have no explanation for it. I didn't.
To be fair, the original movie came out in 1984, which is before either of us was born. But I watched this movie a lot as a kid because it was, for whatever reason, it was always on TV, it seems like.
Right.
And also because back in that time, there weren't many movies that really exposed Asian cultures to Western audiences. And Mr. Miyagi, who is like the Japanese karate sensei who mentors Daniel LaRusso, the main character played by Ralph Macchio, he if you look on YouTube and look up clips of Mr. Miyagi, this guy was like a spiritual life guru before it even was a thing. wax on, wax off, balance, or no bad student, only bad teacher kind of deal. And so what Cobra Kai does is it kind of flips it on the head. I think the general tendency for these like franchises to go back to the well and either replace the cast with like female characters, which they've done in the new Karate Kid, which had Hilary Swank in it actually, or Jaden Smith, a Jackie Chan remake, just like the same beats, but you just substitute things with different, genders or races, and it's not very compelling. But what Cobra Kai does is it takes Johnny Lawrence's viewpoint. So Johnny Lawrence was sort of, as Mr. Miyagi pointed out, is not a bad guy. He just went down the wrong path. And Cobra Kai presents things in his perspective. To him, Daniel LaRusso was this punk kid who stole his girlfriend, ruined his costume at a Halloween party, and still keeps rubbing it in about the fact that he beat him in the All Valley Karate Tournament. And today, present day, Daniel LaRusso is a very wealthy and successful car salesman with multiple dealerships. Johnny Lawrence has never recovered because after losing the karate tournament, he gets berated and beat up by his own sensei. So he's kind of a part-time repairman. And the gist of the story is that Johnny Lawrence kind of takes on the Mr. Miyagi role now. There's a new kid on the block. His name is Miguel. He comes in, he gets bullied, and instead of Mr. Miyagi saving the day, Johnny Lawrence saves his butt from the bullies. And Miguel, in like very much LaRusso fashion, begs him to teach him karate. Johnny Lawrence says no at first, but he relents because he's trying to turn over a new leaf. And what happens is he reopens the Cobra Kai dojo, but LaRusso is still part of the picture. And in his mind, Cobra Kai is still what he believes to be like a bully boys club. And so he kind of goes through these really ridiculous lengths to prevent Cobra Kai from opening, prevent Cobra Kai from being successful. And it's really touching in a sense to see things from the other perspective, because it's now there's a ton of gray area. Now that LaRusso is the wealthy kid, he's kind of the bully. He's kind of the guy who's making assumptions about everyone else. And I think if you go into interviews, that's what's kind of sold Ralph Macchio and William Zabka on coming back to these characters is because they're discovering new layers to them. Right. So I really recommend it, and I really recommend watching Karate Kid beforehand because it really presents a new side, and it's just funny to watch Johnny Lawrence kind of catch up as he grows up from the 80s, which he still kind of lives in. To present day, where he discovers the wonders of the internet. He discovers that there's, more than two genders now. It's got a lot of like fish out of water moments that are good. The only thing is the karate parts have been cranked up like 100 times. And I feel like it's just a good way to get teenagers to start like ridiculous brawls in school cafeterias. Right. If you watch the original film, like there's clever editing so that, they're obviously doing the karate moves, but there's a bit of like amateur clunkiness to it. Like these guys aren't like Power Ranger types like the kids are in Cobra Kai. Right. But I feel like that's sort of like a part of its pull is that it pulls on different demographics. So us, for the older generation, or at least the generation that grew up with the Karate Kid, we love the whole LaRusso-Lawrence rivalry. Right. That's what pulled me into the show. That's what I think is the most interesting. But remember in the Karate Kid that it was actually like a movie aimed kind of for kids, and it had very much a love triangle in it involving Elizabeth Shue, who we mentioned earlier. And this like new generation, it's like the new Degrassi, new generation. Right. And so there's like teen kids for the new kids that are just getting into the show or just learning about the universe. That's two classic properties, like 80s properties in 2 episodes now that have actually delivered beyond the expectations. Thinking back to Bill and Ted Face the Music from last episode. Exactly. Online, we do have a review of Cobra Kai. We're going to get some stuff from Rob from TIFF. We'll have at least one piece on the boys. We'll definitely have one once the season wraps up and they're releasing the episodes slowly one by one. VIFF is also coming up near the end of the month, so we'll have coverage for their as well. You can reach us at kinetoscope.ca or on Twitter at jrobertsnow and at jasonchen16.
And coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow.
And from Vancouver, my name is Jason Chen. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.